Hello, Rick here on Certifiably Ingame, looking at Episode 7 of Star Trek Discovery. And we have a good old-fashioned time loop episode. It's good to see something like the recurring tropes in old Trek are reappearing in the current series. So overall, I've got to say, I had fun with this episode, though of course there are a couple of gripes, but let's just get into it. A great deal of this episode focuses on the character development of Burnham and her developing relationship with Ash Tyler, and I've got to say from the forefront, I'm not really seeing the chemistry, or at least I'm not feeling the chemistry between these two. On the flip side of that, both Stamets and Harcourt Fenton Mudd got a lot of screen time in this episode, and I've got to say, I did enjoy watching their characters. They were a blast whenever they were on screen. Burnham's opening narration at the beginning goes into fill the background details of what's been going on in the Starship Discovery. Stamets has been continuing to act weird, and apparently the Discovery is the linchpin of the Federation's counterattack against the Klingons. Apparently they're doing a lot better now, potentially even winning. I did check the map against an older version of it to see if they'd gained any more territory, but it doesn't exactly look like they have. So Discovery is throwing a party to blow off some steam, and it's fun to see Burnham acting like, well, to be fair, me at a party. It's good to see that level of continued character development, and I think this ties into a bigger thing with Discovery as a series, which I guess I'll touch on now. Basically, I came up with a comparison between how Star Trek Discovery is doing characters and how things like TNG and TOS and all the other Star Treks have done character interactions before and character development. Feel free to disagree, but I feel that the original series, when it introduced its characters, it introduced them as rather, don't take this the wrong way, but rather two-dimensional. Now, this isn't to say they didn't have layers and complexity. By the end of the series, they'd been developed and you'd had all these backstories and things added on to them to actually build a cohesive personality. But when they were first introduced, they only had one or two defining character traits for which you, as the viewer, could focus on, and from there, they built on it. Star Trek Discovery's characters are all introduced as deep and complex layered characters from the get-go, and I feel this is a lot of the reason why it's taking so long for us to identify with any of them, because there's so much being presented to us at one time, we can't get a handle on what sort of person they are, we can't engage with them. A complex, rich, developed backstory is something you build towards, and Discovery does a weird job of front-loading their character development, and then trying to sift through it from there, peeling back the layers when, in my opinion, it could be doing better to be adding to them rather than just starting with, here you go, like this person and all their facets and flaws. This means you end up with this weird situation of several really well developed characters and then other ones who I have to Google the name of because I don't even remember, because they've had so little screen time. In fact, I think this one doesn't even have any dialogue as of yet. In short, you start with a simple character, something for the audience to grasp onto and understand very quickly. And then you start adding layers from there. This is something that TNG did very well, and more recently, the Orville. Because of the way the Discovery characters and cast have been introduced, it's taken us, or at least me, about 7 episodes to begin to actually like some of these characters. But yes, I do like some of these characters. And yellow alert, report to the bridge, because we've encountered something which turns out to be a Gormengander. It's sort of a giant space whale type creature. It's pretty cool to see sort of a different form of extraterrestrial life, and in true Discovery fashion, Lorca doesn't give two shits about it. It's nothing to do with the war, and he has a very one-track mind when it comes to this sort of thing. The rest of the crew, of course, insist that they need to beam it on board as it is endangered, and they need to take care of it. So they go ahead and do just that, but then the creature, well, it sicks up a man, effectively. A man with a plan. And a blaster. And he instantly starts blasting his way through the personnel there. And originally I was just like, how is this man overpowering all of this Starfleet security? But I did come to the quick realisation that these were the scientists and medical team sent down to investigate a space whale. They're not exactly prepared for this. To be fair, I couldn't have called it that day. I didn't expect to see a man get sicked up out of a giant space whale. This fella is quickly unveiled to be Harcourt Fenton Mudd. Returned to wreak havoc on the crew, and specifically get his revenge on Lorca. There's gotta be a backstory there about how he managed to get out of the Klingon prison, whether he cut a deal or let himself out, they let him out, we don't know. But it's pretty cool to see the fact that he's got sort of this hodgepodge space gear that he's wearing. Wasn't sure on the design on first, but then it got mentioned that it is actually an Andorian spacesuit, or at least part of one, hence the little ear parts there for the little antenna. Now, if we could just see an Andorian, that'd be great. Anywho, he seems completely unconcerned by the fact he's practically surrounded by Starfleet on all sides and immediately detonates the ship, killing himself and everyone on board. That's it, Discovery gone, end of. So the episode opens with a party on board the Discovery, and we get to see Michael Burnham doing a good impression of, well, I guess, me at a party. Which sort of shows us that she's at least trying to be social, she just has no idea how, because of her Vulcan heritage. Nice to see some sort of consistent character growth going on here. And there's a yellow alert, so Burnham and Tyler have to report to the bridge. But on the way, Stamets interrupts them and starts blathering about some sort of weird time loop event. Now we know he's been acting a bit strange because of injecting himself with his tardigrade soup that's modified his DNA. So this is probably something to do with that. We'll have to see how this develops. Last thing he shouts before they get onto the turbo lift is that there's a Gormengander approaching the ship or something. Huh. So there is. How did he know? They've only just found out literally just now. Perhaps it's worth investigating. So Tyler and Burnham go down the shuttle bay where they're going to beam the creature on board and have a look as per regulations. It's an endangered species after all. Doing a scan of it reveals the faint traces of a transporter beam emanating from inside the creature, but there's no time to investigate further as the black alert signals that the ship is about to do a spore jump. However, Lorca didn't order such a manoeuvre, and he can't countermand it. So, Tyler, head of security, and Burnham rush down to find Fenton Mudd in the spore drive room, tearing it apart, trying to figure out how it works. What the? How did he... He must have been beaming up from inside that creature. And what's more, he seems to have actually gained control of the Discovery's main computer, erecting himself in an isolation field so that they can't even get at him. How on earth he managed to do this in such a short space of time is crazy. Fortunately, Stamets seems to have climbed down a Jeffries tube and shot him dead, or on stun, I'm not entirely certain. But either way, problem averted, right? Nope, seems the tampering Harry Mudd's been doing to the ship has actually set the spore drive into an overload. It explodes. Oh, the Discovery's gone. End of. Episode's over. So the episode begins with a party on board the USS Discovery. Okay, you get the joke, I'm not going to do it for a third time. Basically, alongside his Andorian helmet, Mudd's acquired a sort of time loop device which has been allowing him to relive the past 30 minutes. How did he manage to take over the Discovery systems? Well, it's simply trial and error. It reminds me a lot of a video game, to be fair, where you can just keep reloading from the last checkpoint if you muck up, and eventually, learning by trial and error, you progress. So he's literally just been throwing security attempts at the Discovery's main computer until he was able to override it. He's been pulling apart the spore drive until he understands roughly how it works. We don't know exactly how many times he's done this, but by the time he decides to take Lorca hostage, he mentions he's already done this at least 53 times, and these are the only jumps in which he successfully killed Captain Lorca. We get a sort of stylized edit of him repeatedly killing Lorca, and I'm not sure if this is supposed to be funny or not. I feel like this was the Discovery Universe's take on sort of a more whimsical humour, but it just came off as feeling rather dark, which I guess matches the tone of the show, but it does paint Mudd to be a complete psychopath. Although, is he truly acting psychopathically and being a cold-blooded murderer if he knows that on the next time jump everyone's going to be back to life again? Yes it does. Now, the fact that Stamets has of course included the tardigrade DNA in his own genetic makeup means that he effectively exists outside of space-time. Or at least his mental capacity does. He remembers every timeline that's been and gone, so he's the one that actually spots the time loops and is trying to plan a way around it. Hence the reason he sounds like a crazy person when trying to explain himself again and again and again. Like we say, he's done this at least 53 times by now. I feel that the episode would perhaps have done in itself a little better if it had been told from Stamets' point of view. In the older episodic format of Star Trek, this is probably how it would have gone down. But of course, we have to follow Michael Burnham, as the entire series revolves around her character, so she's pulled into this one, because Stamets can't get Ash Tyler to trust him, and he needs Ash Tyler to basically divulge everything he knows about Harry Mudd as they shared a cell, because he's trying to work out how Harry Mudd's doing this. So he ropes in Burnham, who of course is the perfect choice for a sociable situation where she has to gain his trust. Like I said, I'm not exactly feeling the chemistry between these two, and I think that's partially deliberate because of how awkward and rigid her character is. But at least Stamets has to spend an entire cycle explaining how Michael Burnham should approach him to actually be social in the first place. Which was a pretty good scene, and I guess effectively provides her with a cheat sheet of how to get information out of him. Anywho, in the penultimate cycle, Mudd's taken over complete control of the ship as per usual because he's tried this so many times by now. He's found Lorca's man cave and he's playing with all the toys and dangerous weapons Lorca has there, including these little dark matter pellets, which apparently are the most painful way to kill someone that is on board the ship that he can think of. Gotta say, they get used about twice in this episode and neither time looks particularly painful. And I gotta say, by this stage it's kind of funny to see the amount of future knowledge he possesses after trying it so many times. For example, there must have been a timescale where this crewman actually managed to successfully get the jump on him, probably knock him to the ground, maybe even kill him or neutralise him in some fashion, but of course half an hour would have elapsed and it would have all begun again, and this time he'd know to be on the lookout for that guy. Stamets is fed up with all the repeated jumps, so he volunteers himself as the missing component, hoping to put an end to the cycle. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew, now free of Mudd's immediate interference, managed to track down the time crystal that's allowing him to perform all these jumps. Seems that it's a technology that's been known to the Federation for a long time and studied, but it can't be utilised for time travel effectively as the crystals themselves are far too fragile and disintegrate within minutes of entering our timeline. We get a blown off explanation about how some fourth dimensional being potentially stabilised it and gave it to Mudd. I have a problem with that. That sort of rampant speculation out of nowhere is not exactly something the Vulcan Academy teaches you, so I don't know where she's getting this hypothesis from. Why couldn't it have just been years of research from another advanced species? But nope, we just get a near literal Deus Ex Machina. I can only think that they've done this deliberately, so perhaps hinting at future interference from extra-dimensional beings. Here's hoping. Anyway, even on this loop they've already lost people. So despite things resolving and Fenton seemingly to have acquired the Discovery and the time loop being over, they decide to give it one more go around to see if they can emerge without losing anyone. Now Michael Burnham's decision here to sacrifice herself after revealing her importance to Mudd at first seems a bit tenuous if you consider it on purely the emotional tether that her and Ash Tyler share, but it's also a very logical approach to things. She won't stay dead, this will never have happened, and they might as well try again. Mudd self-destructs the ship, so here we go again. This episode of Star Trek Discovery starts with a party. Power outage. Stamets explains everything to Burnham. Time loops. They grab Ash Tyler. They tell the captain about everything. They prepare a plan. By allowing Mudd to think that he's won, he's successfully stolen the Discovery, obtained complete control of its systems, gained both Stamets and Burnham to sell to the Klingons, he effectively allows the time loop to end. This time there are no do-overs. This is it, the final outcome of events. Of course, they unveil it was all a trick. This time they've gained access to the non-important systems, such as literally rewiring the captain's chair so that Mudd would signal the wrong ship. In this case, he's broadcast his location to Stella and her father, who have been hunting for him ever since he ran out on his marriage. Having gained the upper hand, they effectively dump him on the Baron and his daughter and tell him never to interfere in Federation affairs ever again. The end. Okay. Yeah. I have a couple of problems with this ending that I just need to get off my chest. Baron Grimes is incredibly rich. He's an arms merchant and he's made so much money. He's not affiliated with the Federation in any way, and now they've just given him someone who knows the insides and outsides of the Spore Drive, Starfleet's secret weapon, in quotation marks. He murdered Lorca, like 53 times over, 54 times over. He killed the entire crew. He blew up Starfleet's most prized vessel, has dealings and knowledge with the Klingons and access to time travel which has come from a fourth-dimensional being. Okay, understandably a lot of that didn't happen because of the time loops, and in this outcome, the worst that he did was damage an endangered species, stow away on a Starfleet vessel, hack a computer, hold the ship and captain hostage, threaten to kill them, and attempt to sell top-secret research to the Klingons. Not to mention, Starfleet does have laws against temporal interference, and admittedly yes, these only apply to Starfleet, but he was involved with Federation affairs. You know, at least whack him in the brig, we know you've got one. Instead, they just set him effectively free. He's not escaped from them once, or he couldn't do it again. Of course he is. He's hardcore Fenton Mudd. I feel this ending was just a bit too lenient on him, to be fair. It would have tied in nicely if the theme of the episode had been a bit more light-hearted and whimsical, and if that's what this episode was going for, on several times, it missed. I did enjoy seeing a return to a sort of more classic Trek style of telling a story. This was very episodic, but there were a couple of things it would have benefited from. I think being told from Stamets' point of view for the episode would have been a bit more interesting, and the tone of the episode was about as muddy as the antagonist. But the performances were solid, and I'm actually starting to like some of the characters. It's just taken us a while to get there. And who knows what Star Trek is going to do now that the Discovery still has hold of his time crystal. I'll be curious to see if this plot point just vanishes or whether it will crop up again later. Presuming, of course, it didn't disappear at the same time his miniature wrist gauntlet interface did. So, I've been Rick, and this has been my recap review of Episode 7 of Star Trek Discovery. Thanks very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time there's a Discovery video. Until then, this episode of Star Trek Discovery begins with a party on board Nankin. Ta-ra!